Canada's housing market just got worse. Affordability continues to decline, even with prices contracting a little bit. We're going to be hearing a ton about real estate this week, especially with some potential cuts coming up. And guess what? Yes, all of it can almost exclusively be blamed on Trudeau. Of course, there are other reasons, but he is such a large factor in this that it is hard to ignore his involvement. And Pierre has done an interesting video. He's doing a little bit of work with his new YouTube channel. He's got his I Call BS series, and we're going to get into that because I think there was some stuff that he was missing in this video, but also some major changes in his language that I found really interesting that I think will be great for us to get into. And shout out to the new studio. Say thanks to Trev, Kath, and my brother Connor because there was a lot of work put into this. We had to change all the tech around. Thank you guys for sticking around. I was on a bit of a break there. Let's get into today's video.
Welcome to the next edition of I Call BS. Before I begin, let's highlight something Trudeau said that is not BS.
For Canadians, yeah, grocery bills suck. Rent sucks. Mortgage renegotiation, oh my God, how are we going to deal with it?
Well, he's right. Housing costs have doubled, and for the first time ever, young people can't afford a home. That really sucks. One problem, Trudeau's been in power for 9 years, so if life sucks, then he sucks. Unless, that is, he can find someone or something else to blame. In a previous I Call BS, I debunked his government's claim that Jean Chrétien, a 1990s Liberal Prime Minister, is to blame for doubling housing costs over the last 9 years. So now Trudeau is taken to blaming the entire world. It's COVID or Ukraine or some other global factor.
You know what? I love Trudeau. I'm just going to say that here, guys. Love him because I've never seen a person who is less willing to take accountability in their life to such a degree that he is just constantly telling Canadians to suck it. I love it. No, it's not my fault. It's the world's fault, guys. I'd love that for you guys to be able to afford housing, but it's the world's fault, not mine, not the guy who's been in charge for 9 years. I love him.
If we could go back to the housing crisis that we're in now, just sort of as an overview, I wanted to run this past you. In 2015, when you became Prime Minister, the average house in Hamilton was about $334,000. 2024, it's $850,000, beyond the reach of many people. What happened? How did governments let this happen?
And to put that in perspective, like you said, $334,000, you'd basically need a $20,000 down payment to afford a house. Like $30,000 and you're at almost 10% down payment. And so with that on an actual income, you'd probably be 80 to 100 grand household income total. You could probably get into that house even with 5% down. And that was 2015. So we're talking less than 10 years ago. That's how affordable a house in Hamilton, Ontario was. For anybody not from Ontario, Hamilton's like $1 million prices now. It's nuts.
Boy, we could talk about the global economy, the inflation crisis that came from the fact that we had a once-in-a-century pandemic. We could talk about the labor shortages that we're facing. We could talk about the fact that Canada has only about 4% affordable housing stock across the country.
But if global factors really doubled Canada's housing costs, those same factors would have doubled housing costs in the entire world. Have they? Well, this all-in-one chart compares how much housing costs and incomes have changed in all 36 developed countries tracked by the OECD since 2015. We see Canada compared to the others. The higher the dot is above the line, the more housing costs outpaced wages, and the more affordability worsened in a given country. If the dot is below the line, it means that housing costs have dropped relative to incomes and affordability actually improved. Again, if global factors were to blame, all countries would see these dots rise together in tandem, and the chart would look like this. But it doesn't. Instead, it looks like this. In Romania, Bulgaria, Korea, Finland, Italy, South Africa, and Poland, affordability actually improved since 2015 because incomes went up faster than housing costs. in Croatia, Sweden.
Romania and Bulgaria, we have seen like their standard of living is increasing, so they're actually getting really high ownership, house ownership rates in those countries. But as a result of a bit more of the wealth spreading around, these guys are getting way higher incomes comparatively to what they were before. So even though house prices have risen in those countries, they're just earning so much more that it's been great for them overall.
Belgium, Lithuania, France, Denmark, and Latvia, housing affordability barely changed at all. Now, all of these countries had COVID, and most are closer to Ukraine and Russia than we are, and their housing stayed the same or got even more affordable. So how does Canada rank on housing affordability in the last 9 years compared to other countries? Well, under Justin Trudeau, we are the worst in the G7 and the second worst of all 36 developed countries tracked by the OECD. Only Portugal did worse.
So basically, so you guys can see the chart here, Portugal is the only one worse than us. And I actually was watching some videos on the Portugal situation and seeing what was going on with them. And it's funny that they actually are experiencing worse than us, but they're doing the same things that we've been doing. What they've been doing is pumping in immigrants, both illegal and legal. And then they've also made their society based around digital nomads now. So people who work remote, and it's actually really, really damaging to the local community in Portugal. So I really think Portugal's on the wrong track. Oh, that's exactly what happened in Canada. You way increase the population without increasing any of the supply. And they are shooting past us at like an alarming rate. So it's been pretty interesting.
Somehow, these supposedly global factors only affected Canada and Portugal. Really? No, not really. Housing is one of the least globally dependent things we buy. What goes into building a home? Land? We don't import land from the world. Lumber? We have plenty right here. Labor? Again, our workers are here in Canada. Housing is homemade, literally and pun intended. The supply of it has nothing to do with the rest of the world. So no, it has nothing to do with the war in Ukraine. When Putin invaded Ukraine in 2014, housing costs did not skyrocket in Canada. Of course, Stephen Harper was Prime Minister back then, not Justin Trudeau. In fact, home building was one of the few industries that did not get shut down during the pandemic. Home building was actually higher during the lockdowns than it was last year. And no, prices did not just go up because people were moving to bigger homes during COVID. Rent on one bedrooms spiked and prices of small condos have risen too.
And yes, we're going to beat this because Pierre starts to talk about it in this video, which is good because as I've said in other videos, you guys know I'm a little skeptical of Pierre still because I want his language to be stronger, and it seems like it's really changing, which is a good thing. Immigration obviously is a problem when it comes to these things. And what's going to happen is Canada is going to end up in a population trap because we're going to be addicted to the immigration, and it's going to be way worse for our economy at large and continuing to make us more reliant on housing for our GDP and all of these other things. So it needs to drop substantially. It's going to be rough because we've gotten a little addicted to it. It's going to be like an alcoholic kind of quitting. So, but we know that that is one of the biggest factors. And yes, they can try and say, oh, supply and demand and all that stuff. Like, we didn't have to shut down for COVID, obviously. Everybody knows that. So seeing these things, like, these are direct controlled variables. Yes, housing was built, but then the other big thing, which is going to be important for us to see with rate cuts and what's happening is demand in the housing market going to continue? Because as housing prices are continuing to crash, that means less houses are going to be built. And if less houses are built, that means we have less supply. Even if we start to cut the demand, the supply won't be building. So we got a lot of things we got to fix here.
Something that would not have happened if people were just dumping their downtown properties for country estates. In fact, all of the land and most of the homes in Canada today were here before either the Russia-Ukraine war or COVID even happened. So enough with the dog ate my homework excuses. So what is the real reason that costs have doubled under Trudeau? Well, real estate prices are determined by supply and demand So let's break those down. Demand for housing is determined by the number of people and the amount of money buying homes. Immigration and money supply are domestic decisions made by the federal government and cannot therefore be blamed on the rest of the world either. The Trudeau government ran massive deficits, doubled our national debt, which forced the Bank of Canada to create $700 billion of new cash that flooded financial and mortgage markets with easy credit that bid up homes.
So that was a big thing that I didn't expect to hear, but we've been hearing Pierre talk about it more, which is he keeps bringing up the money creation. And if you guys remember, we've talked about it. All of our money is created through debt and through deficit and through spending. So every time the government continues to rapidly increase their spending and make our deficit worse, that's more money in the system, which means more money that can go towards housing and increase prices on everything. And it devalues the dollar. So it's crazy to see him kind of saying now, like, hey, he's talked about deficit and whatever, but him talking specifically now on actual talking points of like the housing is being impacted by these exact things. It's been interesting to see, which is, again, making me happier to see that he's bringing up more realistic things. He's still, we get into the immigration stuff and we'll get into that in a second, but I really want him to go at that a little bit harder. I'd like to see that.
There were more people bidding on those homes. Canada built one new home for every 5 new people last year. The worst housing deficit on record. And you don't need to take my word for it. The Trudeau government blames their own immigration policies for that.
I want to start off just by delineating between permanent residents and temporary ones. On the latter, is your government going to, even temporarily while the housing crisis is so acute, cap the number of international students and or temporary foreign workers?
Well, it's something we're going to look at in the first half of this year, Vashi. That volume is disconcerting. It's really a system that has gotten out of control.
I don't think anybody needs a briefing note to understand that having more people in a housing market impacts the housing market.
Meanwhile, he pays local bureaucracies to block home building. We have the fewest homes per capita in the G7, even though we have by far the most land to build on, because we have the slowest and costliest building permits.
So that is one thing where, as much as I can't stand Trudeau, I have to say that this almost has nothing to do with him. The NIMBYism, the issues that we are seeing from these local governments are making prices way worse. If you take the permits and they're $30,000 and all of a sudden you increase them to $60,000, that gets passed on to the consumer at a markup. Every cost always gets a markup. That's just how it works. So it's like, oh, $30,000 plus 10% or whatever it's going to be. There's $33,000 that's added on to that base house price now on anything new that's being built. And as inventory continues to slow being built, as we know, that's going to make things so much worse.
When you balloon demand and block supply, you get higher costs. Let's turn that on its head by adding homes faster than we add people and cash. Here's my common sense plan to do that. 1. Get municipalities to free up land, speed up permits, and lower building fees by requiring them to permit 15% more homes per year and approve skyrise apartments around all transit stations as a condition of getting federal funds.
I like that idea. The problem is with that being like, the plan is it's no matter what, it's just going to be essentially impossible for us to outbuild what the current demand is. So for him to say like, oh, it's going to be, yes, it's going to make things, it's going to help, but not the same way that like absolutely slashing immigration would help.
2, sell off 6,000 federal buildings and thousands of acres of federal land to build. 3, axe the carbon tax to lower building costs and building material prices.
That's got to happen anyways, regardless of building. Like we're talking about housing today, the carbon tax has got to go. Like we will hold Pierre accountable for that because he is running. So when he wins, that's got to go. That is going to help so much across the board.
And 4, end government money printing that inflates real estate prices and interest rates. Build homes, not bureaucracy. Get results, not excuses.
See, this is why, again, the language is changing, but if you look at this video, and it's important to pay attention, he never technically said we're going to cut and slash immigration as one of his points. He had his 4 points there, and not one of them was slash immigration, right? Which we know is one of the biggest things. What he did was he said, oh, even the liberal ministers know that we're bringing in too many people. Well, that's true. But let's use your language, Pierre, because you are the important one who's going to be taking over, that we need to actually make sure that you're the one who's going to be slashing immigration, because I do think once he gets in there, he might be a little scared to actually cut immigration. We'll see. We'll see. We got some time. But thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm happy to be back after a little break. As I said, I was setting everything up, but have a great rest of your day.